So Ghost in the Shell is one of the bigger animes that, like, way back in the day, was kind of like way ahead of its time. It wasn't really the first to do what it did, but a lot of the stuff and as well as the visuals, were like way ahead of its time. Very memorable. And so hopefully here's 10 things that you probably didn't know about the anime as a whole. So in Japan, Ghost in the Shell is also known as Armored Mobile or Mobile Armored Riot Police. See, what happened was during the time when some of the editors were trying to figure out like what they wanted to make out of Ghost in the Shell, there were a couple ideas they pitched at the time. But you see, what happened was one of the editors wanted something more flashy, and so, but one of the other editors was still clinging onto the idea of Ghost in the Shell because they just like the concept, and very likely you can kind of see why they stuck with that, because Ghost in the Shell mostly refers to like, high tech, nanotech arrangement, kind of like Deus Ex, like you have like these superhumans, computers that are all cyborg and everything, but you can't distinguish them from like fact and fiction. They're just basically bio weapons against, like military personnel and all that. And it's really interesting how they really like they knew this before they were writing the script for it. Like, this is what it was going to be. Believe it or not, the very first manga for Ghost in the Shell actually goes back to 1989. I don't know this off the top of my head, and this might be something else we dive into, but I think they got a lot of ideas also from the movie Akira, which roughly came out in 1988. So you can kind of see how that, and I mean, that was huge at that time, when Akira got through all of its, production, and it was setting records left and right. There were people that just drew inspiration from it right away. And knowing Asians, they get right on it immediately. And Japan's no different. So I wouldn't be surprised if they drew similarities from that as well. So when Ghost in the Shell actually came out, it actually inspired the writers of The Matrix, believe it or not. And it's kind of funny because I always wondered, like some of the characters in The Matrix do look very similar to some of the characters in Ghost in the Shell. Again, completely different though, but at the same time, some similarities, like their eyes and all that, the nanotechnology they used, and the augmentations and all that. Kind of again like Deus Ex too. Really interesting to think about that. And I mean, Ghost in the Shell's been a place that take would basically take place in like a realistic setting. I mean, so for example, there is a city in Japan, third highest population, I believe, somewhere, where it's named Nihama, and so basically there are a lot of similarities to it. I think it's spelled Niihama, and so it's interesting to think that they not only drew like similarities to like real life locations, but if you like watch like the openings and the you can see just like how it inspired people. Again, I'll give you another example, going back to what I said about like how it inspired the Matrix. Like if you remember the first opening where like, you see like the water puddles and everything, and then you see the soldier's foot just like stepping on it, and then they disappear because they're using cloaking technology and all that. You can see like where they kind of got the idea for that at. What's even more nuts is even James Cameron, the guy who created Avatar, actually stated that that was kind of what inspired him to kind of want to make Avatar one of the many examples that one series could inspire such a lot of famous like movie directors and all that. It also went on to inspire the Metal Gear, Deus Ex, and Cyberpunk 2077, or whatever year it takes place in. But it's interesting to think, how one series like takes an idea, takes place in the future, and they fight a bunch of a bunch of terrorists and all that in their own like Japanese fantasy way, and what it ended up becoming in the end. Very cool indeed. Based on the manga release orders of the creator of Ghost in the Shell, he actually worked on a couple of animes before. A couple of examples would be Appleseed and Dominion, and then there was another one I can't remember. But basically, he started in 1989, and it was the fourth anime that this guy would work on, the mangas. And what's really interesting is if you actually watch Ghost in the Shell, the Section 9, where the Major works for, and all the other characters that we usually see, a lot of the information that they have is still classified and hasn't even been released. Even if you were someone who watched like all the episodes from start to finish, there's still a lot of things about the show itself we don't know 100% about. Whether that is, what divisions they really work for and how much information they actually have access to. It's really interesting to think that even for a company that or a futuristic team that fights for anti-terrorism, you really have to wonder, what other secrets do they have inside their communications. And we'll wrap it up like this. Okay, so think of it like this. In 1982, there was a movie called Blade Runner that was released. And I can't remember 100% who made the movie off the top of my head. But when you think of Blade Runner, the original, it's very possible that that's where they drew the inspiration from, but in a Japanese setting. And, so it's really interesting to think that 7 years later, Blade Runner would influence people in Japan and all around the world. As like because some people say Blade Runner is like one of the greatest movies that was ever made, and I've watched it a few times, and I can definitely see where they get the ideas from, and why, because it's like they fight terrorism, and then they fight terrorism in, the movies too. So it's really cool how like, all the stylish actors and all the stunts they had to probably pull a movie like that off in real life. And I'm not talking about just like, animation versus like real time, so there's certain things in an animation world you can do, but not in real life though. So yeah, so again, if I find anything else, I'll talk about this even further, but basically here's just 10 things I thought maybe I'd share with you. Well, actually here's 11. So the woman who does the singing for Ghost in the Shell, her name was Ogira. She died in January 17th, 2015, I believe. This will be the 5th year she's died. 6th year? Yeah, she died 6 years before 2015. Okay, so 6 years later, and she would actually be my birthday's on January 18th. So I don't know how many people there are that are fans of hers, because she was huge worldwide, and apparently there are some people out there that probably got her birthday. Like Martin Luther King Jr. was on January 17th, if I'm not mistaken. So it's crazy to think that you're sharing, like, maybe there's people out there that are like really fans of hers, and they share the same ill-fated day that she passed away due to lung cancer. And I mean, she died young. But I mean, there's tons of people out there that go sooner than they should. A couple of examples could be like Jimi Hendrix and Otis Redding, for example. They were already successful in their early 20s, and they just passed away. But, one of them died in a car or a plane crash, and the other one died of drug overdose, if I got that correct. That was Jimi Hendrix, and then Otis died of a plane crash. But it's crazy to think, though, that, it's like the old saying goes, the pretty boys die young. But, yeah, anyways. Okay, so, comment, rate, subscribe to this video. If you like these kind of videos, check them out. I try to make them every day. And, yeah, subscribe, and just, have a nice day, everybody. And support me on Patreon if you want to. You don't have to, though, but it's down there below if you want to.